Hi, my name's Marie Lazar. I'm a 3D artist at Goodgame Studios, and today I'm going to talk about finding an art style for your student or indie game. Now, everyone dreams of making a standout game, something that will draw as much attention as The Last of Us, Assassin's Creed, or The Order. But one of the most common problems novices run into is the problem of overscope. It's hard to understate how frequent and pervasive this problem really is, but suffice to say, I've yet to see a student game that I felt was underscoped. At the beginning of a project, everyone feels the unlimited potential of what their game could be. But let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. AAA graphics demand AAA teams. Creating even a single character in a game like The Last of Us can cost upwards of $100,000 and take months to make, and require the involvement of a dozen highly specialized experts. The purpose of this talk is to get you thinking about ways you can make games that look professional when you only have a few artist generalists working with you, or even if you're the only person making your game. So, with that in mind, let's start with something familiar: pixel art. Pixel art has experienced something of a resurgence in the last few years, as indie and mobile games have really come to flourish. Pixel art is much beloved for its retro nostalgia that harkens back to the days of 8-bit gaming. Its small file sizes make it naturally performance-friendly, and it's a practical choice for games with a lot of action or precise movement. Think platformers like Super Mario Bros. Or RPGs like Pokémon. The great thing about modern pixel art is that it isn't beholden to the same technological limitations as games from the old days. You have the freedom to use special screen effects like blur, screen flares, and real-time light and shadows. You can mix resolutions, or even blend pixel art with 3D. And, unlike early computer artists, you have the freedom to use an unlimited number of colors and massive resolution sizes. However, just because you have this freedom doesn't mean you should use it. There's a history and a craft to making pixel art, and it should be respected. When pixel art is done well, no more colors are used than are absolutely necessary, and every single pixel is in its optimal position. Because of this attention to detail, good pixel art also takes more time to do than one would expect. I used to assume it would be faster to pixel a game than to draw one by hand, but after working on a few myself, I know it can take just as long to pixel a sprite that's 32 pixels high as to paint one that's 64 times that size. For instance, when I made this game, Mirage, as a student, I had to leave the background unfinished because I underestimated exactly how difficult it would be to make the perfect sand texture. Still, working at low resolutions definitely has its advantages. It can mean big time savings, particularly when it comes to animation. It's possible, for instance, to get by with a simple 2-frame up-down walk cycle or a 1-frame attack action. That's pretty reasonable, even for someone with little to no animation experience. Pixel art also lends itself well to tile-based games, meaning even a relatively small set of sprites can be placed like building blocks to make entire levels. More recently, low-poly 3D has replaced pixel art as the trendy way to style your game. And for good reason. It eliminates the need for unwrapping and texturing, meaning you can spend that much more time making raw stuff to populate your world with. Games that use this style focus heavily on the language of shapes. They don't have all the detail provided by texture maps, so they rely on strong composition and color theory to make them interesting. They also allow you to spend more time on other aspects of your environment. If you want to focus on levels with dramatic lighting, or show off your fancy custom shaders, this could be the way to go. This is the style my friends and I opted for when we made this game, Scarlet, for a 48-hour game jam. We 2 artists were able to model a fully furnished 4-room apartment, complete with balcony, and animate 2 characters in our very limited time. The level of abstraction that comes along with the style meant that not only did we not have to make textures, we could also safely ignore, for example, the lip movement on our characters, without the game looking wrong or incomplete. You can also combine the benefits of low-poly models and pixel art into a kind of simplified, retroistic 3D. You're probably already familiar with this style through the sandbox phenomenon Minecraft, where literally everything in the world is derived from a cube, and the default texture size is a mere 16 by 16 pixels. But your textures don't need to be pixel art necessarily, they just have to be simple. 30 Flights of Loving gets by using roughly drawn faces as characters, in a way that evokes the charm and simplicity of papercraft. Jazzpunk does something similar, making characters that look like a set of wooden toys. This is the approach we took for Umbrella Party, another Game Jam game about rallying a crowd during a political speech. We were able to create a whole audience in 2 days by duplicating the same character template and giving it different skins. Neither of the artists on this game were animators, but we were able to make some crude actions like face shaking and banging fists within a couple of hours, and changing the facial expressions was as easy as swapping in a new texture. As with Scarlet, our simple animations didn't call attention to themselves, because the rest of the visuals in the game were correspondingly simple. Of course, just because your team is small doesn't mean your game has to look retro. If what gets you going is slick high-resolution graphics, you're not out of luck. You can still make a great-looking current-gen game and keep it manageable by scaling down the number of assets you have to deal with. Mobile games already have this figured out. They're restricted severely by download sizes, so it's to their benefit to streamline the number of assets they use as much as they can. The Room is a game about solving a puzzle box, so all the attention is lavished on this one prop. The titular room the game is set in is merely implied by a window in the background. This is also a useful way to scale your project if you're short on manpower. Vanitas was made with only one artist, so it restricts itself to a handful of easy-to-model knickknacks in a drawer no bigger than the phone it's played on. Its beauty and minimalism are well suited to the game's emotional objective of inspiring thoughtful reflection in the player. If you're a character animator, or you're working with one, and you want to make a game that has characters, you may want to design it such that it only requires one, and then put all of your effort into polishing that one character as much as possible. I'm not a character animator as a rule, but I was able to take this contract job for a game starring a cartoon monkey because it only involved one complex character, a lot of simple bird characters, and the one background. This gave me enough free space to experiment with doing extra bits beyond the design brief, like animating trees blowing in the wind and giving the monkey different facial expressions to show how well the player is doing. Sometimes, what you really want is to pool your efforts into an environment with breathing room. That's great. Let me recommend a first-person perspective to go with it. First-person games have been enjoying a lot of positive attention recently, and despite the mocking title of Walking Simulator, they're demonstrating that this viewpoint has gameplay possibilities far beyond the established first-person shooters. The biggest advantage to a first-person perspective, apart from being straightforward to program, is that it eliminates the need for a character model. This is a good thing, as characters can be one of the most time and resource-intensive parts of making a game. Want to make a story-driven game, but think you need models for your character NPCs? Think again. You've got journals, audio logs, off-screen narrators, and environmental storytelling. Indeed, games have found lots of clever ways of justifying a lack of human characters, whether it's everyone being assumed into heaven, or merely having left without writing a note. The student game I worked on, Dust, is primarily a third-person game where you sail a ship across the desert while being chased by a giant sand whale. Even though most of the game is in third person, we decided to make walking around the world's hub, a giant stone lighthouse, a separate first-person segment. This meant that we could break up the tense sailing sequences with some restful walking ones, and it also gave the player more time to appreciate the subtle background storytelling we did with the environment. This was only a small sample of ways you can scale your visual style. Indie games are a good place to look for more, since most of them leverage some kind of shortcut in order to keep their scope manageable. Often these shortcuts lead to new and striking visual styles. For example, For Each Our Roads of Winter gets its haunting, intense look by forgoing surface color and instead focusing on material roughness and reflections. Donut County gets its charming storybook style by using 3D and forgoing any sort of lighting whatsoever. Limbo gets its moody look by limiting itself to a grayscale color palette and depicting everything in silhouette. Simpler still, Thomas Was Alone starts with blocks as characters and anthropomorphizes them with its strong writing and voice acting. Of course, if box drawing is out of your league, you can still make a cool character-driven game like Her Story through the magic of video recording. Or, if you're feeling crafty, you could try animating your game with claymation, as in The Dream Machine. Even if you're not big on the visual arts, you can still craft a compelling world with words, as demonstrated by any of the many games made with twine. Or invent a core mechanic that uses only darkness, as in the audio-only game Deep Sea. Now, please don't think I'm arguing against making realistic characters or large textured levels. If character art is where your passion lies, then by all means, make a fully rigged and realistic animated human character. My point is that everyone has a limited amount of time, talent, and patience. You have the best chance at succeeding if you focus on what you're most interested in and look for ways to simplify or abstract out all the other stuff. As the saying goes, the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. But if you decide what your priority is and narrow your scope accordingly, you're least likely to end up with a misdirected mess and most likely to end up with something that's appealing, unique, and meaningful.